Hi, this is Jordan Ramirez. Today's Minisode is a surreal fairy tale fantasy, The King and the Mockingbird, released in 1980, directed by Paul Grimault, a gorgeous animated rarity that I hope you will enjoy as well. So, without further ado, you are listening to a Film Talk with Jordan Ramirez Minisode. The film I am recommending for this minisode is the surreal fairy tale fantasy film The King and the Mockingbird, released in 1980, directed by Paul Grimault, starring Jean Martin, Pascal Mazzotti, Agnès Viala, Renaud Marx, and Raymond Boussier. King Charles XVI, portrayed by Pascal Mazzotti, rules over the kingdom of Tachycardia. He is the most unpopular and tyrannical ruler of that kingdom. However, he is in love with the painting of the shepherdess in his bedroom right next to the painting of the chimney sweep. On one night, the shepherdess, portrayed by Agnès Viala, and the chimney sweep, portrayed by Renaud Marx, leave their painting canvases and escape from the king's bedroom. The king's painting double has escaped from his canvas and took out the real king to fool even his own police force. The king has set up a reward assignment for his police force: find and capture the shepherdess for the king's marriage and imprison the chimney sweep. With the couple desperately escaping from the evil king's clutches, they receive help I thought that I should watch it in its entirety. So I did that, and it is a wonderful film to watch and enjoy. Watching this film, it feels like watching a Disney movie, but it's not. It's an entirely different film when it comes to the animation quality. As you watch the original animation sequences from the early 1950s decade, it feels like a refined Disney-type film, but with the new sequences from the late 1970s decade, they look abstract and completely different. It's almost like watching two different movies. On the narrative side, it's slow, yes, and there's not much when it comes to dialogue. It's more in the visuals and the actions of the characters in the film that keep the story moving along. The first half of the film starts out as a comedic farce that talks about the king's lavish and bizarre lifestyle, and then by the second half it shifts to a dark and pessimistic tone about the underground city beneath the castle. But the good news is that it ends on an optimistic note, which I will not reveal on this podcast. The characters in the film are unique in their own way. While the shepherdess and the chimney sweep are not that interesting in the film to me as I watched them throughout, I was more interested in the Mockingbird. To me, he was the sort of Jiminy Cricket of the film. Not only is he the storyteller, or the guide, but he also helps out the main characters while also trying to outsmart the villain, since his wife was murdered by the king. The voice acting is great in this film to enjoy, just for me. I am a fan of listening to Jean Martin's voice as the Mockingbird in this film. Now, I admit that I have not seen his performance in the Battle of Algiers, which I know is a real sin for me not to watch, but I thought that his performance in this film was spectacular to watch even if you just hear his voice. As was Pascal Mazzotti in the film, who plays the tyrannical but pompous and cross-eyed King Charles XVI. His performance is not overacted or theatrical. It feels more subdued and restrained and makes it a joy to watch throughout this entire movie. Even as the king's painted double takes over the film, the king is now seen as a caricature of the real monarch, epitomizing the theme of the cult of personality. Even though it is a fantasy film, it does eerily remind me of Metropolis, especially with the themes of classism, the relationship with man versus technology, slave labor, and the dehumanization of the human condition. Plus, you also get to see a giant robot that appears halfway through the film that feels like science fiction. There are also a couple of references that I will mention, including King Kong, Tintin, Modern Times, and The Thinker. The director of the film, Paul Grimaud, was one of France's most well-known animators for his experimental and avant-garde animated shorts during the 1930s decade. Grimaud, along with his partner André Sauret, founded the animation studio La Gemeaux in 1936. Grimaud's style of his animated short films that he made during the 1930s decade were both lyrical and satirical, while also political in nature. When the war broke out in Europe, American films were becoming increasingly hard to find and unavailable during this period. The animated shorts from Les Gemeaux found their way to the mainstream audience. One example is a 1947 animated short film, The Little Soldier. It was the first collaborative effort between Paul Grimaud and poet-screenwriter Jacques Prévert, and their first adaptation of a Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale. The short film would win the International Prize at the 1948 Venice Biennial. After the completion of the project, they decided to collaborate on their next animated project, a film adaptation of Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tale, The Shepherdess and the Chimney Sweep. The production for the film began in 1948, and it was originally supposed to be the first European animated film in the post-war era. It was at that time the only animated feature that was in production in Europe. However, by 1950, the project was taken away from them, and the cost of its production took a toll on the animation studio. Even though the film was unfinished, the producer of the project and Grimaud's partner, André Sauret, decided to ignore Grimaud and Prévert's pleas and release the film that was only half completed in 1952. Grimaud completed within the 2-year period from 1977 to 1979. For the new version of the film, only half of the original footage from the 1952 film was used, along with new animated sequences, a different score, and a new ending. With the new sequences that were added for this version, it totaled to nearly 90 minutes. An example of two different animation styles that differ from each other is in the lion pit sequence. You can see the original animated style from the 1950s and a new animated style from the 1970s that feels more abstract. The new score for the film was composed by Wojciech Kilar. Grimaud gave no instructions to Kilar of how he wanted the music to be composed. Grimaud shared the film to Kilar to study it carefully to figure out how he thinks the score should be composed. Kilar went back to Poland, recorded the score, and returned with a complete score. It was accepted with no changes. But before the film would premiere, Jacques Prévert, who worked on the film script, passed away in 1977. This film was dedicated to him in his memory. The new version of the film was released on March 19, 1980 in France, and the film was later re-released in France on October 22, 2003. The completed and digitally restored film version did not come to the United States until October 5, 2014, at the New York Film Festival as one of its selections. It was later shown at New York City on November 21st, and was later shown at the Three Rivers Film Festival on November 22nd. The film's biggest legacy, however, was that it had a profound influence on two legendary filmmakers, Hayao Miyazaki and Isao Takahata, co-founders of Studio Ghibli. Miyazaki in an interview said, "We were formed by the films and filmmakers of the 1950s. It was through watching Le Roi et l'Oiseau by Paul Grimaud that I understood how it was necessary to use space in a vertical manner." While Takahata described Grimaud in an interview as having achieved better than anyone else a union between literature and animation. Its influence can be seen in Miyazaki's film debut, The Castle of Cagliostro from 1979, in which the castle in that film was modeled after the king's castle in this film. While the film may feel slow and boring to some viewers who have never seen a film like this, I think of it as a missed opportunity to an animated film that is underappreciated and ignored. It is a beautiful and rare animated gem that I am sure anyone who is a fan of neglected or animated rarities will surely enjoy, with great visuals, a wonderful story, and a collaborative effort that never gave up their vision to bring it to life. It is an amazing spectacle to behold. While the film is not available on home video like DVD or Blu-ray, you can find it on Canopy. I highly recommend watching this animated marvel that will both amaze and fascinate you throughout. On the next episode of Film Talk with Jordan Ramirez, it's Marcel the Shell with Shoes On from 2021, directed by Dean Fleischer Camp, starring Jenny Slate and Isabella Rossellini, airing this Friday at 4 p.m. on Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Radio Public. This has been a Film Talk with Jordan Ramirez Minisode. Tune into the Minisodes every Monday at 12 p.m. on Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Radio Public. If you want to be a guest on my special interactive video podcast, make sure to send your recommendation on the Film Talk with Jordan Ramirez Facebook page or send your audition video on YouTube or Instagram Shorts. The video podcast will be on Spotify. If you are on Spotify, make sure to like and subscribe to keep this show going, and make sure to recommend your friends and family members to tune into this podcast. I also have my own YouTube channel, Film Talk with Jordan Ramirez, where you can watch my latest video podcast and make sure to like and subscribe. And until then, I'll see you at the movies.